Hello friends, welcome. Friends, we as Indians are wanting to grow at a faster rate. Currently, our target growth rate is 6.5%. Friends, we all know that the biggest barrier to growth that India is currently facing is because of the word inflation. Because all our energy is getting consumed in managing inflation. Why it is like that? Because once the inflation is high, RBI has to keep rates higher in order to contain liquidity. And once the liquidity gets contained, then only the demand and supply equation can be matched and the prices can get contained, and that will drive inflation down. Once the inflation gets down, you can pull down rates, and in the process, you achieve two objectives. One objective is you make loans cheaper. Another objective is that you cut down on government interest payments obligation, which is a huge component of the overall budgetary expenditure. Now, since we are living in an integrated world where the political order of the globe is impacting our well-being, therefore, this headline becomes pretty important. In this current mess with tariff wars, with lot of uncertainty, whether we will be able to achieve this rate cut or not, and whether this rate cut is going to become sustainable. So friends, today's video is all about trying to understand this whole concept, whether this rate cut is going to be sustainable, if at all there will be a rate cut, whether we have the leverage and the capability to do that, and what is the data telling us. That's all we are going to do in this video. So be with me and I will take you one by one all that I have spoken in the opening part of my video. Means why government is interested in cutting interest rates, what is that they are going to achieve, why public is interested in the rate cuts, and what we have seen as far as our inflation management is concerned over a period of 11 years. Whether really we have been able to meet the window period of RBI's inflation target of 2 to 4%, how many times we have overshot, and that is going to give us a reference point that what we are going to see in coming future, and what are the risks, means how the character of inflation has changed and what kind of risk that we carry as we move forward. So that's all we are going to do in this video. Friends, be with me and we'll go one by one. First thing first, what is the main objective of having a lower rate, interest rates? What is interest rates? Interest rate is an RBI policy of containing short-term interest rates of borrowing. Okay, it's called repo rate. Means the lending is regulated on a short-term basis, not on a long-term basis, on a short-term basis, and the rate is fixed. And this impacts short-term instruments only, not long-term. A larger proportion of government borrowing is short-term and mid-term. And therefore, government is interested in rate cut more than the public. Because that's why you will see the government all over the world. It talks about cutting rates down, because government's fiscal management is directly attributed to interest outflows. And you can see this from this chart. What is this chart? This chart is Government of India account summary trend. And in this chart, you can clearly see that our revenue expenditure is 39.44 lakh crores, out of which interest payments for this fiscal year FY26 budgetary estimate is 12.76 lakh crores, which is almost more than 33. It is more than 33%, right? So this is a huge wasteful expenditure. Because of this interest payments, we are not able to do many of our things which we should be able to do in order to create more value. Because this is putting a lot of pressure on our budget and our ability to do fiscal management. You see, we have put down our fiscal deficit on absolute terms to 15.69 lakh crores, which is, if I take a GDP, percentage of budgetary to GDP, you will find that this number is, let this whole thing come up again, percentage of GDP, and you'll see that this number is 4.74%, right? This is just a minute, I think this is month. So let me make it year. and let me just put it 0, and then you'll see that this is how much? This is 4.4%. This is the number, right? So that's where one of the objective of the government. Second thing is that what was the second objective? This is what we spoke about, that why government is interested in cutting rate. Second is that whether this whole window of 4 to 2% is the objective of RBI to contain inflation. What RBI has been able to achieve? What is the past data telling us? Whether we were within the window period most of the time or we were outside the window period, right? So that is the next thing we are going to talk about, right? So let's look at the data, and for that I have created a dashboard in Tableau, and let's talk about this. And this you are going to find it very interesting. So what is this dashboard all about? Let me just explain to you. The first block here is the time series from FY 2015. The second block here is the general index in percentage basis point of the combined. Right, combined. So we have got urban, rural, and combined. So this is for the combined general index, and I have plotted 3 different lines. One is 0, another is 400 basis point, another is the 800 basis point, and this is the subcategory of items. Right. So first, let's look at what we have been able to accomplish as regards the number of months where we were below the RBI threshold window, right, of 4%, which is the maximum window of which we are going to beyond which we don't want inflation to go beyond, right? 4 to 2% is the window which RBI wants to manage inflation. So if you look at, these are number of months, right? So if you look at and count the number of months within this whole period that you see here, starting from FY 15 till FY 25, you will find that 13 months out of the total. How many months? Out of the total 11 into 12, which is 132 months. 30 months we were below the threshold level of 4%, and rest of the months we were above. So which means that if I do a percentage calculation, 30 divided by 132, 30 divided by 132, you see that 22.7% of the time we were below the threshold level, this threshold level here, this one, 4%. So for 78% of the time we were above. So we have not been able to contain inflation within this window period. What? Below this window, 4%, means within 4 to 2% we have not been able to. So our record has been pretty poor within this period from 2015 till 2025, right? So you can clearly see here, let me just show you again how we have been able to traverse. So look, it was higher, it went down, and then it went up, and then we were above, then maybe for 2 months we went down, and then we went up, then we are going up. These are before COVID period, by the way. Then we went down, then we started going up before the COVID period because of demonetization, etc. And then we again went up, and then after the COVID, then it shot up, and we were hardly, at the below the 4% level, and now suddenly we have been started to go down. Okay, can you see this? So this is what our history is, that for 23% or 22% of the time we were below. So because of this whole effort to 2 to 4%, right, that which is the RBI target, we have not been able to accomplish. So why then this headline? So my question is that, why this headline that we are talking about here? That is the question I am asking. That inflation when we seen falling below 4%, when we have been always, most of the time we have been above 4%, then this does not make any sense. The 4% window. We have not been following this for a long period of time. Now, let me give you another dimension to it to measure that whether we were below or above the 4%. And this is another chart which is going to give you a very good reference, and then we'll go back to that chart which we saw. Now this chart is what? This chart is a block period of the financial year starting from April till May, and what I've done is I have taken a window average here. Window average is what? All the numbers here have been averaged out. which is the same inflation number, have been averaged out, and I've calculated the average inflation for that financial year. So can you see this? For the financial year FY25, the average inflation is 4.86%, and the contribution of vegetable is the highest, which is 149 basis point. So friends, this is for FY25. Now let's look at FY24. Now you tell me, because inflation cannot be just measured for one particular month. It's an average. You have to see sustenance of inflation going down and going up. This year we have not done well. Maybe we'll do better in future, right? But given the risk that we have on a global front, on tariff war and other uncertainty, I don't know what's going to happen. But let's look at what we have done in past. FY24, this general index was what? 5.36% on an average period, average of that over the period. Now let's look at FY23. What was it? 6.66%. Then let's look at FY22. What was it? 5.5%. Now let's look at FY21. 6.17%. Okay. Let's look at FY20. 4.76%. Let's look at FY19. Yeah, this year, this particular block, we were lower. That's why I told you 23% of the time we were lower. Then let's look at FY18. Again, we were lower, right? Then let's look at FY17. We were higher, 4.53%. And then let's look at FY16. We were higher. Then look at FY15. We were higher. So, what is the conclusion from this? The conclusion is that only for 2 fiscal years, right, which is what? Which I think is FY18 and FY19, we were below that 4% threshold. The second important thing is that you will find, let's go back to the same chart which we were discussing here. You will find that the character of India's inflation keeps on changing with time. And how do I know that? Because this chart below tells you this. This is a very interesting chart. Okay. What is this chart telling us? This chart has got individual items, right? And the width of this curve, let's say housing. I have clicked on housing. So you can basically go and watch the width of housing at various periods. So the thinner the width means that its contribution to the overall inflation is low, right? Higher the width of this curve, right? The overall contribution to inflation is high. So like that, what you can do is you can basically choose any item. For example, vegetables. So you see that vegetable has got a very strange kind of inflation, India's inflation. So here it was very, very large contribution, right? You see large contribution. There are periods where it has contributed negatively to inflation. Can you see this? These are the periods in FY22, FY17, there are brief period. So there is no seasonality as regard vegetables are concerned. It's pretty strange, you know. You see this? This especially for this particular block, you see the kind of contribution to inflation as far as vegetable is concerned. This is such a huge area. Okay. Now let's look at another dimension here. Now let's look at transport and communication. The transport and communication is basically driven by oil prices. So during the COVID period, this number basically went, I think before or within that particular period, this number actually, the width of this curve become very, very fat. And then fortunately, now it has thinned, right? So let's look at another item. For example, milk products. Now milk products, you know, more or less, I think there were brief periods where it was quite thin, and then suddenly, you know, it kind of became very, very wide. So let's look at another paper. No, I think let's look at clothing. No, not clothing. Let's look at one more big item, which is pulses. Let's look at pulses. Where is pulses? Because pulses actually is a very, very important item. Yeah, this one. So if you look at pulses, you know, there are brief periods where pulses have contributed significantly to the overall inflation. See, FY16, right? Then there are brief periods where the pulses have contributed to lower inflation, negative inflation. Now, fortunately here, the pulses are now in containment because this had contributed to higher inflation within this particular period, but they have now. So in bottom line, you know, what I'm basically trying to tell you is that our inflation in real sense is not cyclic in nature, because these should be cyclic in nature. If you look at items, when you calculate inflation is always calculated from what? If you take the index of March 2017, then what happens is that you have to take the, where is my pen? I've lost my pen. Let me take my pen again. Quit screen burst, and I'll just take my, okay, just a minute. Oh my God, let me take my pen again. I lost my pen. Yeah. So here is my show toolbar. Yeah, here is that. So what I was trying to say, let me just again get back to the argument which I was making. So let's go here. So what I am trying to say is that whenever you are measuring inflation, you take the reference of 1 month and compare that with the corresponding month of the earlier, so suppose, let's say if I have to measure inflation and this is index, and let's say not, actual inflation. So I take the index here, and then I subtract and divide by this, right? So that's how you measure inflation. So this is not cyclic in nature. So inflation should take into consideration the seasonality. So our inflation is not seasonal in nature. I don't think that, we have a season, though we have a metric of measuring inflation using this concept of balancing out seasonality. It is not like that. So where are the risks now? Let's understand the risk. The biggest risk that I see is because of the imported inflation on various items which are going to get impacted going forward because of the falling value of rupee. Now, what are those items here? Let's look at those items here where we can make oil. The biggest item is oil. Where is oil? Transportation and company. Where is that? So if I look at transportation, housing, vegetable, yeah, this one. So you see that this is quite thin here. See? But if because of any reason, because of global uncertainty, because of the high rising price of oil, because of devaluation of rupee, and if this becomes higher, then there could be a risk here. Similarly, there could be other items, right? For example, whatever we are oil and fat. See, oil and fat again started bulging out. Though it had negative. See, this oil and fat had contributed significantly to higher inflation, right? In this particular period of time. Again, you see this is bulging out and expanding. Vegetable has, because of the winter, has contributed to lower inflation now. Because of that, this number has gone down. Now, what if? Because this is very erratic. We don't know what is going to happen in summer. This number is quite erratic. So if this vegetable thing again goes wacky and again start behaving like this, what we saw here, right? You see? Then what will happen to our inflation? So there are many such items because it is not possible for me to take care of each and every item here and be specific on. I'm just giving you a sense, right, of whether we are going below and the rate cut is going to be sustainable. So friends, one thing which I'm going to talk about here, which I have not spoken out here, is I'm going to show you how rate cuts impact government bond yields and why the government of India is so hung up on reducing rates. So this chart is going to tell you the story. So this is the comparing bond rate across various policy rate and inflation. So here we have repo rate, we have inflation here, and these are the bond rates of various duration. So you can see that in the period of FY23 Q1 till FY20 Q4, or even let me just stretch this a little bit further, you will see that though the inflation was very high during this particular period, you see that the bonds of lower duration yields were all in green. And because these were in greens on a percentage basis, and the T bonds and the T bills, etc., all those things costed less from a government point of view or for borrowing. So if the yields are less here, so the government can save money in these instruments, and that is why the government is hung up on driving the interest rates down. It is not just about growth alone, it is also about saving lot of interest cost. So I think, friends, I have given you a sense by looking at these data as to whether we can rejoice on the inflation rates falling below 4% in February. First time in 6 months, and rate curve hope brightens. Maybe rate might get cut. Whether the rate cut is going to be sustainable given our past experience that we have only two fiscal years within the window period of 11 fiscal years where he actually had gone below 4% on an average of the overall fiscal year. So our experience or our performance as far as meeting the expected 4% as a cutoff line for keep containing inflation is pretty poor. We haven't really done much within that window period of 11 years. So this whole story of 4% I don't think is to be amplified here. What needs to be amplified is that whether we will be able to maintain or sustain rate cut irrespective of the fact that we will be above 4%. Because our experience has been in past, except for the 2 fiscal year which I told you, we were always above 4% on an average window of the fiscal year. So I don't find any sense about talking about these one individual month. Right, friends? So anyway, friends, I'm going to stop here. I thought of giving you a very good sense as to what is going on. Because this data has to be seen in this light. Unless you see the data in this light and see our past performance, what we have accomplished, you can't make any prediction of future. Right? Thank you, friends, for your time. I'll come back with a new video next time on a new topic. Thank you very much.